Welcome aboard the Somebody Like You podcast. I would like to welcome all the new listeners, people who are just joining the Somebody Like You crew. And if you are following the podcast and the YouTube mission of getting YouTube or social media to pay the rent, welcome aboard. It's so nice to have you. I'm really excited about this episode because what I did is I went into Chat GPT and I was like, just give me some things we can talk about. What are some of the most discussed things in the mental health space? And I actually asked it to prompt me questions so I can answer them on the podcast. So this is almost kind of like it's a mental health coaching call on a podcast. But as always, when we get this thing started, we need a word from our sponsor. And fortunately for us, I'm the sponsor. So if you're looking to maybe ease a little bit of that chaos in your mind, tap into the best version of yourself, or just in general, a place you're looking where you can talk about the things going on in your life and maybe how to navigate through, maybe need a little bit of a healing and tour guide through it, Somebody Like You Mental Health Coaching. Brought to you by yours truly, me, Somebody Like You. You can check the links in the description if you're interested. So now moving on through it, what we're going to be doing is we're going to bring this up and we're going to answer the first question. So the first question on mental health, the question I asked was like, hey, can you list me some of the most requested talking points, yada, yada, yada. And one that came up, it was how do we overcome the stigma of mental health, or overcoming the stigma of mental health was the talking point. And the first question is, why does mental health stigma still exist today? I think that's a really good question. It's because while there's been so many advances in talking about mental health and talking about quote unquote feelings and how we're doing and all of those things, I feel like a lot of it has been corporate America checking boxes. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody. I'm saying that there's a lot that just do it for that reason. A lot is like, hey, this is trending, and if we want to continue to advance, we're going to have to hold space for this, which is a great starting point. I'm not knocking any corporation or business for doing that. Some do it better than others, some don't do it at all. But what I think the cool thing about it is, it's the conversation that's happening. So why does it still exist? It's because we're still in like infantile stages of having mental health discussions, understanding what mental health is. And the tricky part about that is mental health looks different to everyone. But this is something I've come up with in the past couple days as I've been, on this mission to grow on YouTube and grow on all social media platforms by helping people with their mental health. The one thing I noticed is the way people talk about mental health. It has this negative and this heavy feel to it, like it's something is inherently wrong when we discuss the word mental health. And what I wanted to bring to light and what I wanted to maybe just shine the light on is mental health is the good stuff too. Mental health is happiness, it's joy, it's excitement, it's success. It's also those things. It's just like when we have a healthy body or an unhealthy body. Well, I don't want to say that either our mind is healthy or our mind's not healthy, but there's times where our mind is reacting to what we're feeding it, and it's having unhealthy tendencies. That doesn't mean depression or anxiety is unhealthy. It's actually just the circle of being an emotional human. Like, the thing we often forget is human beings, we have emotions. We're built and designed to feel emotions. So when we label grief, sadness, depression, and all this stuff as inherently bad, I think we're starting from a place of, I don't want to call it misinformation. I want to call it from a place of maybe just like negligence. Like, we just assume that's what it is. Well, what if we think of ourselves as the artist, where we can reshape how we think about and how we discuss mental health in our lives, and not take on the responsibility of trying to change the way other people talk about it. It's just understanding what our mental health looks like to us and how we want to paint that picture. Like I said, mental health isn't all bad stuff. It's celebrating the successes, the winnings, the journey. Like, all of that, I think of, how we got here on the Somebody Like You podcast. it's been a journey. Like, this is a great success just to be creating and producing a podcast to talk about all things mental health. That's breaking a stigma. There are people and so many self-help books up there. It's just, the problem is the way from the very, very seed of inception, right? Is we think it's inherently bad. Self-help means that we are not good. I have an update for everybody. We're always on a self-help journey. We're always progressing in our lives, in our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, emotional health, all of the healths, right? So remembering that the start of this is mental health, and the stigma around it starts with how we inherently think about it. We inherently think it's bad. So let's start changing that. Let's look at mental health as, hey, we all experience this. The good, the bad, the ugly, the things we celebrate, the things we wish you haven't done, didn't have to go through. But it's all a means to the experience and the journey. So I think that's a great place to start on why there's still a stigma around mental health. It's because we discuss it as if it's a problem with somebody. Still, anxiety isn't a problem with somebody. It's something they experience. It's something we all experience. To varying degrees, yes. One person might just express anxiety in a different way than you express anxiety. Doesn't mean one's better or worse. It's uniquely to you. So I think about it when it comes to us and myself, is just understanding everybody's experience with mental health is different. So if we can just kind of come from that place, the stigma is going to start breaking down. It's going to become more normalized because there's not going to be this dark cloud sitting over it all the time. We all go through this stuff. And when people are going through the depths of it and really going through the things that we're going to label as difficult and bad, that we understand. And then when they're celebrating and going through the good stuff, whether it be graduation, whether it be promotions at work, overcoming an illness, that's mental health too. We don't want to just label the mental health as all bad, because when we go to celebrate, it's like the mental health was the enemy. No, the mental health was the strength. It was the journey. It was the way we got to where we were. So don't rid mental health of its glory when we get there by just keeping it under that dark cloud. So I think that's great. I think that's why one of the reasons mental health stigma still exists and there's still that stigma is because of that. So let's bring it up. What was the second one as I look through here? How can someone differentiate between temporary sadness? Oh, that's a different question. Don't mind me. If you're listening, rewind for a second. Here's the second one. How can we start conversations about mental health to reduce stigma? I think that is a phenomenal question. I think one way we can do that is hold space for the conversation and not necessarily always have to compare it to ourselves. I'll repeat that. Holding space for somebody else's mental health and their conversation while not directly relating it to ourselves. What holding space looks like during a conversation is acknowledging, asking questions, checking with how they are emotionally doing, what impact has it had on their life, without having to be like, oh yes, I did that too. Oh yes, well this is what my anxiety has done to me. Yes, there's points where we relate to each other and stuff like that. But oftentimes the mental health conversation starts to become a pissing contest. It starts to become who's gone through worse, who's had it worse, and that's not the case. It's just holding space for both of us to be able to experience it and then actively listen. Because when that conversation's being had, sometimes when you're not acknowledging somebody else's struggles or somebody else's victories or somebody else's experiences, what happens is no one wants to talk to you about it anymore. And when I say you, I mean anyone. They don't want to talk to anybody about it because it feels like it's falling on deaf ears. And when it's falling on deaf ears, why am I going to continue wasting breath about my experience when the only thing it's validating is it wasn't worth it? So I think the best way to have a conversation about mental health is come from a place of community, come from a place of listening and care. It doesn't mean you can't share your personal experiences, but it's like a game of double dutch. It's knowing when to jump in and share and add to the conversation instead of overtaking the conversation and making it about you. Now, I know some of us with ADHD or autism, that's the way we do communicate. That doesn't mean you're wrong for doing it. It just remember be like, hey, I'm aware of this. And I want you to know that, hey, I am listening. I'm going to do my best. But my communication style, I'm going to relate through stories. Is that okay? Now, if you talk to maybe older generations, it's kind of like, oh, why we have to dance around everyone else's feelings? I'm just going to talk the way I talk. Well, that's part of the problem, right? That's making it about you. It's not making it about the person going through the mental health struggles or the mental health moments, the mental health journey at that time where they're looking to talk about it. It seems like you want it to be about you. So I think there's just a way in which we can approach conversations in general, whether it be about mental health or be about anything. I think a really important part of it is understanding it's a conversation. It's not a debate. Mental health is a conversation. Mental health is not a debate. I think that's really important to remember. And let's bring up the next talking point as we are being interviewed by Chat GPT. All right, here's the question. What are most common misconceptions about mental health conditions? Let's think about that, right? What are some of the misconceptions? That we're weak is a big one. That if you're going through mental health struggles, that you are weak. If you are succumbing to mental health, that you are not good enough, that you are different, that you like those type of things. Mental health is just like talking about a physical, not even a physical injury, just a physical attribute. Like when you say someone's strong, because maybe they have big muscles or they have broad shoulders or you see them lifting weights, that doesn't make them better or worse than anything. It's just like when you see someone going through, I argue, or I just said it's not a debate, and I go and I argue. I hold space for somebody going through mental health struggles is incredibly strong because what you're seeing from them is like looking at a marathon runner, and then you see them 2 hours after the marathon, and it's like nothing happened. They're just going into work, right? Well, imagine what anxiety, depression, and all of the mental health conditions are doing to your mind and your body, and then you're still going to work. You're still showing up for your family. You're still doing all of the things. You're incredibly strong for working through your mental health stuff, right? It's so this misconception that you're weak or you're less or lesser than somebody is crazy because you just ran a marathon and then you went to work right afterwards. You went and did all of these things because if we break down anxiety, it's an unwanted adrenaline rush, right? Your body's trying to survive something and your mind is telling the body it's not safe. So it's kind of like, okay, I should say your brain. Your brain's telling your body. Your amygdala is firing off signals to your body. So remember, like, you're not weak for going through mental health struggles, or you're not better for going through mental health victories. You're just going through it and being you. So I think it's really important just to hold space for people and understand that, like, just because someone is sad, angry, anxious, depressed, doesn't mean they're defective. It means that's how they're feeling right now. Just like we are feeling maybe content. Maybe we're feeling happy, excited. It doesn't mean both of those things can exist at the same time. It just means one person is currently feeling a certain way. Doesn't mean they're lesser. Doesn't mean they're better. We're all just being. That's the sentence. We are all just being. I think it's a really good one. A misconception. That's the one I would go with. Is the misconception is that people working through mental health struggles are weak, have something wrong with them, have to be diagnosed something. No, I think it is just what they are being and what they are at that time, what we are being and what we are at that time. What a great question. Thanks, Chat GPT. That's Chat GPT in somebody like you language. Let's come on through and we'll see how can individuals advocate for themselves or others in the face of the stigma. Ooh, that's a really good one. How can you advocate for yourself? I think a really good way is be bold and brave to have the conversations because that's your authentic self. When you're being your authentic self, you're showing up as you are, not as you think other people want you to show up as. That was me for a really long time. I was going through what felt like a hellstorm in my mind, but I had to show up because there were these expectations that I put on myself that I thought other people needed me to show up in a certain way. So I never showed up as my authentic self. So I think one way you can do this is really show up as you are and advocate for yourself as you are. And it ties into all of the other things, right? You're not weak. It's just how you feel. So when you advocate, I think a great way is filtering your social media content. So how you advocate for yourself is eliminating all of the things that are no longer serving you, that are maybe causing drama, overstimulation, unnecessary like deep scrolls and mindless scrolls on social media and whatever it might be. That's really important because you have to filter what you're watching, because you've probably heard, and if not, where your attention goes, your energy flows. It's a catchy way of saying that your attention is currency, and where you pay your attention to, pay attention, you're going to get back in return. So if you're watching mindless content on whether it be the television or your phone, your computer, you're going to get mindless in return. And an inactive mind gets stir crazy. So remember, when you're advocating for yourself, a great way is to start by filtering the content which you're watching. And if you're listening to this and you're watching this on YouTube, you've done a great job in filtering in the content which you're watching. I jokingly say that, but it is things like this. Like if you're in that space, it's finding things like this where you feel comfortable, you feel safe, you feel heard, understood. Now, is this always going to be your cup of tea, like a mental health podcast or mental health content? No, maybe not. Maybe you get really into woodworking and this was maybe a seed for you to understand, I am looking for hobbies that I can get into. And when I filtered out all of that content on my social media or whatever I was watching, I found that I really love woodworking. And you get really into that. Like I said, season, reason in a lifetime. This podcast and these mental health talks might just be a season for you right now. It might be a reason for you to go and find where you're more valued. So starting out, filtering your content. That's one way to be a great advocate for yourself. And I think a second way to be a great advocate for yourself is showing up as your authentic self and inspiring others. I know that's a weird way to answer that question of being like, how can you advocate for yourself? And it's to be there for others. But I truly think that our purpose as human beings, like why we are here, is to help others. So I think being of service to your community, to your people, to your family, to your friends, to your loved ones, whoever it may be, when you are found with purpose, you're advocating not for only for yourself, but for others as well. Because I really, truly believe that we see so much of ourselves and our struggles in other people's struggles. And so when we relate to them and we're able to help them, newsflash, that's this podcast. I went through my mental health, like depths of hell, and I chose to turn around and stick my hand out. And I wanted to bring people to where at least I am and was currently. And it was working through it and getting to a place where I can be an advocate, not just for myself, but for others. I think that's really important. So advocating for yourself through filtering your content, through being of service to your community, going to therapy, mental health coaching, counseling. No one's going to do those things for you. That's why I started a mental health service, was because there's sometimes can be a stigma on therapy and feel like there's this barrier between yourself and a therapist. Now, that's not all therapists. I've had some amazing therapists. But in the coaching world, I can only speak from experience there as the coach, is I it feels more like you're sitting on like that 1999 lawn furniture at like 2 in the morning having deep talks where you can connect and be your authentic self. So finding people you trust, communities you trust, whether that be researching online, whether that be word of mouth, whether that be social media stuff, find people you trust, but don't stop there. It's kind of like I always consider like finding a therapist, a coach, or a counselor kind of like online dating. Keep swiping. Just because the first person you found was a dud or wasn't right for you doesn't mean that there's not a better coach, counselor, or therapist out there. So to be an advocate for yourself is to not give up on yourself, not to give up on the search, not to give up on bettering yourself. It's a forever journey. There's no finish line here. So actually, as I'm saying that, I think reading books, a great way to be an advocate for yourself is to read books. Now, I'm an audiobook kind of person, so I think that is a great way to do it, is while I go for drives or I'm on my runs or whatever it may be, is filling my attention and my attention with mental health. I almost called them meditations. That's because I'm reading a book by Marcus Aurelius called Meditations. But it's knowing where I'm placing my energy in those days where I otherwise might just be listening to mindless music, which is good some days. But I think those are great ways to advocate for yourself. Let's go back to our series. If you are listening on Spotify, I apologize for the lapse in fun stuff. Maybe I should fill like with jokes when I'm doing this. All right. Our last mental health question around overcoming the stigma of mental health is, what role do media and public figures play in shaping perceptions of mental health? Oh, what a great question. I think mental figures, I think public figures play a massive role on how we view mental health. Because remember, where we see them mostly is on social media, on the news, on the movie screens or television screens or the stages, and they're all acting. There's no way that, see, right here's the thing. I do my absolute best to be my authentic version of myself when that camera comes on. But there's always going to be a version of me that is presenting, because you're not sitting right across from me. Although I try to envision as much as I can that an entire community of people is sitting across from me, I'm sitting in a room by myself right now talking. And imagine, so there's only such a level of authenticity you can reach as that version of you in these moments, right? It's different if we're sitting in a park and we're talking. You're a little bit more authentically yourself. So remember, you're seeing a projection of people and what they want you to see. Even if I have the purest of intentions to be as authentic and genuine as I can only reach a certain level, because at the end of the day, I'm sitting in a room by myself talking to a camera and a microphone, right? So remember, when you see public figures out there doing what they're doing and portraying maybe these lavish lifestyles with surrounding themselves with beautiful people and things, we don't know what they're going through. You often hear the more successful people get, the more miserable they were, the more they turn to substances, the more they just became a lesser version of the self they wanted to be. So remember, you're not seeing the full story of people. You're seeing what people want you to see. And I think that's really important. Like, I'm not jumping on while I'm having I say that, but I have jumped on social media before in the midst of anxiety and panic attacks to try to be the authentic version of myself and show people what they look like. But even then, you're not in your mind with those people, or they're not in your mind. So remember, when you're looking at people on social media, it's a highlight reel, a fake highlight reel at that. And when you're looking at people on movie screens, they are reading and portraying scripts of fictional characters. or even characters that existed in the past. Like, they're portraying people, they're portraying mindset, they're portraying all of the things. So remember, if you're comparing yourself to these people and their lifestyles and what they have versus what you don't have, it's really unfair. You've heard the quote probably a million times: comparison's the thief of joy. It certainly comes into play. Comparison to public figures is the thief of joy when it comes to your mental health. Because what it makes you feel like is that your journey is not as good as somebody else's, whereas to you, your journey is all you have. Your journey is so important. It's that your awareness is allowing you to look at other people's stuff and things and lives and make you feel insignificant. Remember, no one can make you or your life feel insignificant without your permission. So if I'm sitting there and I'm on a coaching call, it's like an aha moment, right? It's, what's the one variable we remove from that? And if you're on the other side of this camera, I would hope you say, we removed permission for them to make me feel this way. That's incredibly powerful. And if you're looking for a little bit of free advice on that, on how to start doing that, simply just become aware of it. Become aware of when something or someone or some place makes you feel insignificant, and just take note of it. Be like, this is the feeling that arises when I feel that way. These are the things I'm going to start revoking permissions to. It's incredibly powerful. It's also incredibly rewarding, and sometimes you get to feel a little bit, I don't know the word, it's not power hungry in the sense of like controlling others, but you get really proud of the amount of control you realize you have over the things you thought you had no control over. There comes that feeling of just pride of, oh my gosh, I'm able to do these things. So remember, when it gets down to that point and when you're being made to feel a certain type of way, even by some of your favorite public figures, it's okay to remember, like, I might just need to remove a little bit of my attention from them right now because I'm feeling lesser about myself. And that's not the goal, right? You're not a victim to feeling lesser about yourself. You're allowing it to happen. So it's just working on not allowing that to happen. And it's just step by step. One of my favorite quotes recently, I don't even know if I heard someone say it or if, I'm sure it's a famous one, is small steps climb mountains. And the more you think about it, it's really, really true. People get incredibly far by consistently taking small steps. But we're judging people based off what looks to be massive steps. I would venture to say 99% of people want what they see people have, and only 1% of us, if that, are willing to go through the things those people did to get it. I think of that as it comes to our mental health journey, right? Seeing what felt to be the depths of hell for myself, and now I get to this place, and if I'm ever met with somebody that says, you don't understand, and I realize just how separate we are, because I do understand. And when I say these things that I've either done or I've helped people go through, is you're recognizing one thing. People just aren't ready and willing to put in that level of work yet. And that's okay. I wasn't. I might argue that I got to that point because I wasn't, but I had to. So if that's where you are right now, remember, you're not wrong for not wanting to do that work, or you might not know what that work looks like, because the work I had to go through, or the people you follow, or the people that you love, the things they went through might not be the same things you have to go through. That's the journey, is understanding what we go through or not what we go through, is what we require to go through as ourselves on the journey. So I hope that was able to help on this episode of Somebody Like You podcast. Once again, this was not sponsored by Chat GPT. This was enhanced by Chat GPT, which I think was actually really cool because it brought a lot of really good questions about mental health stigmas. I think we answered a lot of really cool things. And if you are looking to support me as I hit my microphone, if you are looking to support me on this growth on whether it be socials, YouTube specifically, but all of my socials, I'm looking to grow for one simple reason: to help break the stigma of mental health. I want to create content that you can share with your loved ones that will help them. Just like sending memes, just like quoting movies at dinner, I want this to be a place where you can send something to someone and be like, I think that will help them. I think this person could really hear that. I think this might, I don't know, impact it some way. That's what I want to do this for. So if you find any value in any of this, please subscribe, please like, follow, all of the things. Most importantly, if you think this will help somebody, please share it with them and let them know you're thinking about them, because that's a love language right there. I appreciate every one of you. Thank you so much. I'm sending you so much love, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Somebody Like You podcast. Peace.